The wind carried secrets across the Arctic ice shelf, and Raven Moss had learned to listen. For 3 months, she had lived inside Station Polaris, a research outpost where the sun forgot to rise for half the year. Her job was simple: keep the generators running, monitor the heat exchangers, and make sure nothing froze that should not freeze. Everything else was silence and snow now, but today, the silence was broken. Raven felt it first through her boots, a vibration that did not match the rhythm of machinery. It pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and weakening. She checked the monitors in the control room, but all systems showed green. The other researchers had taken the transport back to base camp for supplies, leaving her alone for the week. She pulled on her thermal suit and stepped into the white void outside. The cold bit through 3 layers of insulation immediately. Her breath formed crystals before her eyes. She followed the sensation like a compass pointing toward something impossible, trudging through snowdrifts that reached her waist. The vibration grew stronger with each step until she stood at the edge of a crevasse she had never seen before. The storm must have opened it recently, tearing through ice that had been solid for centuries. Raven activated the floodlight on her helmet and peered down into the darkness. What she saw made her heart stop. Scales, hundreds of thousands of them, each the size of her palm, shifting colors between deep crimson and molten gold, even in the frigid temperature. They belonged to something massive, something that should not exist outside of ancient stories and children's dreams. A dragon lay trapped in the ice, one wing bent at an unnatural angle, frost gathering on its elegant snout. Raven had always been practical. She fixed things that were broken. She did not believe in magic or fairy tales. Yet here was proof that the universe held more wonders than any textbook had taught her. The dragon's eye opened just slightly and found her. The pupil was shaped like a keyhole, surrounding an iris that held galaxies. That single look contained no threat, only exhaustion and a plea older than words. She did not hesitate. Raven returned to the station and gathered everything she thought might help: thermal blankets, medical supplies, climbing rope, and the plasma torch they used for ice cutting. She made 3 trips, building a supply cache at the crevasse's edge. Then she rappelled down into the frozen darkness, with her heart hammering against her ribs. Up close, the dragon was even more magnificent. Each scale reflected light like stained glass, and patterns flowed across its hide like living art. Raven touched the nearest wing gently, and heat radiated through her glove. The creature was warmer than the ice, but cooling fast. She worked quickly, using the plasma torch to melt away the frost that trapped the wing. Steam hissed and rose in clouds around them. As the ice released its grip, the dragon shifted slightly and made a sound that was part relief, part pain. Raven's mind suddenly flooded with images. She saw a world of floating islands connected by bridges of light. She saw cities built from crystal and song. She saw the dragons soaring through skies, painted in colors that had no names in human language. Then the vision shifted, as she saw darkness consuming everything. Planets going silent. Stars dimming. An ancient evil spreading like ink through water. Raven stumbled backward, pressing her hands to her helmet. The dragon was speaking directly into her thoughts, bypassing language entirely. The communication felt intimate, as if someone had reached inside her chest and touched her soul. The images continued. She saw a fleet of ships, not built by human hands, fleeing through space. She saw families huddled together, children with eyes too large and skin that shimmered like pearls. Refugees. The dragon showed her that they were coming here. To Earth, because their own worlds had been destroyed. And Ember, this was the dragon's name, had been sent ahead as a guardian and a scout, but something had gone wrong. Ember had been caught in Earth's magnetic field and pulled down during the storm. She had crashed into the ice with enough force to crack the glacier. Now she was trapped, injured, and running out of time. Her people would arrive in bays, and without her guidance, they might be seen as invaders rather than survivors seeking shelter. Raven finished freeing the wing and wrapped it carefully in thermal blankets. She built a small heating unit from spare parts and positioned it near Ember's core. Throughout the work, she felt the dragon's gratitude washing over her like warm rain. There was something else, too. Something Raven had not expected. Curiosity. Affection. A connection forming between two beings who should have been impossible to each other. As dawn began to lighten the sky above the crevasse, turning the ice into shades of pink and gold, Ember lifted her head fully for the first time. She looked at Raven with those galaxy eyes, and a single thought came through crystal clear. Thank you. Little star. Raven sat down in the snow beside the dragon's massive head, her practical mind spinning with impossible questions. She was a thermal engineer from Colorado who fixed broken machines. She was not supposed to be the person who saved a dragon, or became humanity's first contact with refugees from the stars. Yet here she was, and somehow it felt exactly right. Ember's breathing steadied as the heat returned to her body. Her scales began to glow brighter, pulsing with inner light. Raven reached out slowly and placed her ungloved hand against the warm scales. The dragon hummed, a sound that vibrated through flesh and bone, and Raven felt something shift deep in her chest. This was not just rescue. This was the beginning of something that would change everything she thought she knew about the universe and her place in it. Above them, stars faded as true morning arrived, but Raven could still see them reflected in Ember's eyes, and she knew that her quiet life of generators and ice was over. Something magnificent and terrifying had just begun. The dragon healed faster than anything Raven had ever witnessed. Within 2 days, Ember could move her injured wing without flinching. Within 4, she could fly short distances across the ice shelf, her body cutting through the Arctic air like a comet made of fire and grace. Raven watched from the station windows, unable to look away, unable to pretend this was anything close to normal. They had developed a language between them. Ember could not speak with words, but she communicated through feelings and visions that bloomed directly in Raven's mind. It was more intimate than conversation, more honest than anything Raven had experienced with another human. When Ember felt joy, Raven tasted sunshine. When the dragon felt sorrow, Raven's chest ached with the weight of lost worlds. On the 5th morning, Raven woke to find Ember waiting outside the station's main door. Her massive form curled against the building like a cat seeking warmth. Through their connection, Ember shared a new vision. Ships, dozens of them, hidden on the dark side of the moon, waiting for her signal. The Velinari refugees were afraid to approach Earth, without knowing if humans would welcome them or destroy them. Raven pulled on her coat and stepped outside. The temperature had dropped to 40 below zero, but she barely felt it anymore. Ever since touching Ember, something had changed in her body. She stayed warmer, healed faster, needed less sleep. It was as if the dragon's presence had awakened, something dormant in her cells. She climbed onto a supply crate to be closer to Ember's eye level. The dragon lowered her elegant head, and their foreheads touched. Images flooded Raven's consciousness. She saw the Velinari people clearly now. They were humanoid, but more delicate, with skin that reflected light like opals, and eyes that held multiple colors at once. They were artists and philosophers, scientists and dreamers. Their civilization had lasted for 50,000 years before the darkness came. The darkness. Ember showed her glimpses of it, careful not to let Raven see too much. It was a force that consumed everything, turning thriving worlds into dead rocks floating in space. The Velinari had barely escaped, taking only what they could carry and leaving behind everything they had built. They needed a new home. They needed Earth. But Raven understood the problem immediately. Humanity was not known for welcoming strangers. They barely tolerated each other. If alien ships suddenly appeared in Earth's skies, the military response would be immediate and catastrophic. Fear would win over compassion every single time. She pulled back from Ember and looked into those impossible eyes. "We have to be smart about this," Raven thought, knowing the dragon would feel her meaning. "We need to find the right people first. People who will listen." Ember rumbled deep in her chest, a sound that Raven had learned meant agreement. Then the dragon did something unexpected. She shifted her massive body and extended one wing like a bridge. An invitation. Raven's heart hammered. She understood what Ember was offering. A flight. A chance to see the world from a dragon's perspective. It was dangerous and reckless and completely insane. She climbed onto Ember's back without hesitation. The scales were warm beneath her, each one fitting together perfectly to create a surface that was both smooth and secure. Raven found a natural groove between Ember's shoulder blades and held on as the dragon's muscles tensed. Then they were rising, lifting off the ice with powerful beats of wings that sounded like thunder. The Arctic fell away beneath them. Raven saw the research station shrink to the size of a toy. She saw the vast expanse of white stretching in every direction, broken only by dark water and jagged pressure ridges. The wind roared past her ears, but Ember created a pocket of warm air around them, protecting her human passenger from the killing cold. They flew for hours. Ember showed her the planet from above, the curve of the horizon, the thin blue line of atmosphere that separated life from the void. Raven cried without meaning to, overwhelmed by the beauty and fragility of everything. She felt Ember's emotions mixing with her own until she could not tell where the dragon ended, and she began dot as the sun touched the western horizon. Painting the ice in shades of amber and rose, Ember shared something new. A memory, not of her own life, but of something ancient. Raven saw humans and dragons flying together thousands of years ago, before recorded history. She saw partnerships that transcended species, bonds that made both stronger. She understood then why touching Ember had changed her. They were not meant to be separate. Humans and dragons had evolved together, two halves of something whole. But then the dragons had vanished, retreating to the stars for reasons Raven could not quite grasp. They had left humanity alone to grow and stumble and forget. Now they were returning, not as conquerors, but as refugees, bringing with them other survivors from other dying worlds. Ember descended slowly, spiraling down through layers of cold air until they landed back at Station Polaris. Raven slid off the dragon's back on shaking legs. Her face was numb, her fingers stiff, but her heart felt larger than it had ever been. She turned to look at Ember and found the dragon watching her with an expression that seemed almost vulnerable. Through their bond, Ember sent a question without words. It came wrapped in hesitation and hope, in fear and longing. It was not a simple question. It carried the weight of choosing between worlds, between species, between everything Raven had known and everything she could become. Raven understood what Ember was really asking. When this is over, when my people are safe, will you come with me? Will you fly among the stars? Will you be mine as I am yours? The answer rose in Raven's chest before her mind could even form the thought. It was yes. It had always been yes. From the moment she had looked down into that crevasse and seen scales glowing in the darkness. From the first touch of their connection, she had been choosing this path. She reached up and placed both hands on Ember's snout. The dragon closed her eyes and leaned into the touch. Between them, something deeper than friendship solidified. It was partnership. It was devotion. It was a bond that would not break even if galaxies separated them. But first, they had work to do. Raven spent the next 3 days making careful contact with people she trusted. She reached out to Dr. Wilson Park, an astrophysicist she had met at a conference who believed in life beyond Earth. she contacted her former professor, a woman named Helena Cross, who had government connections and an open mind. She found a journalist named Omar Bright, who had spent his career investigating cover-ups and searching for truth. She told them everything, sent them proof, and asked them to help. One by one, they agreed. Within a week, Raven had assembled a small group of humans willing to stand between the Velinari and the military forces that would surely come. On the 8th day, Ember received a transmission from the ships hiding behind the moon. Their leader, Thorn Vex, was ready to make contact. The refugees could not wait any longer. Their supplies were running low, and children were getting sick in the cramped vessels. They needed to land soon or risk losing more lives. Raven stood on the ice with Ember beside her, looking up at stars that suddenly felt much closer. Somewhere up there, thousands of beings were placing their hope in a thermal engineer and a dragon who had found each other by accident. Or perhaps not by accident at all. Perhaps this had been written in starlight long before either of them was born. Ember spread her wings wide, preparing for the flight that would change two worlds forever. Raven climbed onto her back one more time, and together they rose into the sky. They were heading south, toward civilization, toward the people who needed to hear this story before the ships came down dot as they flew through the night. Raven pressed close to Ember's neck and felt the dragon's heartbeat synchronizing with her own. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Human and dragon, earth and stars, two halves of an ancient bond, reunited at last. The emergency meeting took place in an abandoned observatory outside Fairbanks, Alaska. Raven had chosen the location carefully. It was remote enough to avoid attention, but accessible enough that people could reach it quickly. 27 humans gathered in the dusty main hall, their breath forming clouds in the unheated space. Scientists, military officers, government officials, and journalists. Each one had been contacted personally. Each one had seen the evidence, and each one had agreed to listen before making judgments. Ember waited outside, hidden in the forest. Through their bond, Raven felt the dragon's nervousness. Ember had faced many dangers in her long life, but she had never tried to convince an entire species to open their hearts to strangers. Everything depended on the next few hours. Raven stood at the front of the room, her laptop connected to a projector that cast images onto the curved dome above them. She had not slept in 3 days, surviving on coffee and adrenaline, and the strength Ember somehow channeled through their connection. She looked at the assembled faces and saw skepticism, curiosity, fear, and hope in equal measure. She began with the truth. She showed them footage of Ember, recorded on her phone. She displayed the calculations that proved ships were hiding behind the moon. She presented testimonies from astronomers who had detected unusual readings. Then she did something more powerful than any evidence. She brought Ember inside. The dragon had to curl her body to fit through the observatory doors, but she managed it with elegant grace. Her scales reflected the dim emergency lighting, creating patterns of crimson and gold across every surface. The humans gasped, stumbled backward, reached for weapons they had been asked not to bring. But Ember simply settled onto the floor and waited, patient as stone. Raven approached the dragon and placed her hand on Ember's neck. Then she spoke directly into the minds of everyone present, not with her voice, but through Ember's gift. She shared the visions, the dying worlds, the refugee ships, the children growing weak in cramped quarters, the hope that Earth might be different, might be better, might be the place where survivors could finally rest. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. Captain Iris Hall, a military commander with 30 years of service and a reputation for making impossible decisions. She had gray in her dark hair and scars on her hands from combat tours in 3 different continents. She looked at Ember without flinching, then turned to Raven. Her voice was steady when she spoke. How do we know they are not a threat? How do we know this is not an invasion disguised as refugees? It was the question everyone wanted to ask, but feared voicing. Raven had known it would come. She looked at Ember, and the dragon responded by sharing one final vision. She opened her ancient memories completely, holding nothing back. Every human in that room saw the truth of what the Velinari had suffered. They felt the loss of homes and families. They understood the desperation of parents watching their children fade. They experienced the weight of 50,000 years of civilization, reduced to cargo holds and hope dot when the vision ended. Several people were crying. Captain Hale's jaw was tight, her eyes bright with emotion she refused to release. She studied Ember for a long moment, then made a decision that would echo through history. I will stand with them, she said quietly. I will convince my superiors to allow a peaceful landing. But I need time. Can you give me 3 days? Raven conveyed the question to Ember, who sent it up to the ships orbiting beyond the moon. The answer came back within minutes. 3 days. But no longer. Children were dying. The meeting dissolved into planning. Half the people left to begin their work, carrying the evidence that would hopefully prevent a war. The other half stayed to coordinate landing sites, supply chains, and medical support. Raven found herself in the center of it all, translating between Ember and the humans, bridging two species with nothing but intuition and trust. During a brief moment of quiet, Raven stepped outside. The aurora borealis danced overhead, green and violet curtains swaying in the magnetic field. Ember followed her and settled beside a grove of pine trees. The dragon's scales dimmed, conserving energy. Through their bond, Raven felt how tired Ember truly was. She had been supporting others for so long, channeling hope and strength, protecting her people from despair. But who protected her? Raven leaned against Ember's side and closed her eyes. They sat together in comfortable silence. Two beings who had found something neither had expected. Companionship, understanding, love that transcended biology and logic. Ember shifted slightly and sent a gentle thought. When this ends, little star, you must choose. You cannot walk in both worlds forever. Eventually, you will have to pick one. Raven had been avoiding this truth, but she could not hide from it any longer. If she stayed with Ember, truly stayed, she would have to leave Earth behind. The bond between them was growing stronger every day, changing her in ways she barely understood. Soon she would be more dragon than human, caught between forms, belonging nowhere completely. But if she stayed on Earth, if she chose her species and her home, she would lose Ember. The dragon would return to the stars with her people, and the connection between them would stretch and fade across impossible distances. Raven would live the rest of her life knowing she had touched something magnificent and let it go. She pressed her forehead against Ember's scales and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. How do I choose? How do I decide between everything I have been and everything I could become? Ember's answer was gentle. You already know, little star. You have known since the beginning. You are only afraid to say it aloud. The 3 days passed in a blur of coordination and negotiation. Captain Halal proved to be extraordinary at navigating military bureaucracy. She convinced generals and politicians that peaceful contact was not only possible, but necessary. She pointed out that any species capable of crossing galaxies could have destroyed Earth already if that was their intention. She reminded everyone that humanity's greatest moments had always come from choosing compassion over fear. On the final day, Thorn Vex himself descended from the ships. He came alone, piloting a small craft that landed in a clearing Raven had prepared. The Velinari leader emerged, and Raven's breath caught. He was beautiful in an otherworldly way, tall and slender with skin that shifted through shades of pearl and silver. His eyes held three colors at once: blue, gold, and violet, swirling together like any Bule dot. He approached Ember first, kneeling before the dragon and pressing his forehead to her snout. Words passed between them in a language Raven could feel but not understand. Then Thorn turned to Raven and bowed deeply. "You saved more than one life when you freed her from the ice," he said, his voice melodic and strange. "You saved all of us. We will remember this. Every child born on this world will know the name Raven Moss. The landing happened at dawn. 12 ships descended through the atmosphere, scattering clouds as they came. They settled in the valleys of Alaska that had been prepared for them, landing so gently that not a single tree was disturbed. Hatches opened, and the Velinari emerged slowly, blinking in Earth's sunlight. Children held their parents' hands. Elders leaned on walking sticks carved from trees that no longer existed. They looked at the mountains and the forests and the sky with expressions of wonder and grief combined. Raven stood with Captain Hawley and watched as two civilizations met for the first time. There was fear, yes, but there was also curiosity. Human children waved at Velinari children. Scientists immediately began talking to their alien counterparts, discovering that mathematics was indeed universal. Journalists documented everything, knowing they were recording the most important moment in human history. Ember stood beside Raven, her wings partly spread, her scales glowing in the morning light. Through their bond, Raven felt the dragon's relief and joy. Her people were safe. Her mission was complete. Now she could rest. But Raven felt something else, too. A question forming, gentle but insistent. "What now, little star?" Raven looked at the scene before her. She saw humans and aliens working together to unload supplies. She saw Captain Hall directing soldiers to help construct shelters. She saw Dr. Park already deep in conversation with a Velinari physicist. Earth was changing, growing, becoming something new, and she realized Ember was right. She had always known her choice. From the moment she had rappelled into that frozen crevasse, she had been choosing. Every action since then had been an answer to a question her heart asked. Before her mind caught up Dot, she turned to Ember and placed both hands on the dragon's neck. The bond between them flared bright and warm. "Take me with you," Raven said simply. "When you return to the stars, take me with you. I want to see what you have seen. I want to fly between worlds. I want to stand beside you, wherever that leads." Ember's joy exploded through their connection like a sunrise. The dragon lifted her head and roared, a sound of pure triumph that echoed across the valley. Every Velinari turned to look, and understanding dawned on their faces. They knew what this meant. The first human had chosen to join them, to bridge the gap between species completely. Captain Hall approached slowly. She looked at Raven for a long moment, then smiled sadly. "You are sure about this? You know you cannot come back. Once you change fully, Earth will no longer sustain you." Raven nodded. "I am sure. Someone needs to go with them, to represent humanity among the stars. Someone needs to be the bridge. And I was chosen for this the moment Ember and I found each other." The captain embraced her tightly. "Then you carry all our hopes with you. Show them the best of what humans can be." The transformation began that night. Raven lay beneath the stars with Ember curled around her, and the dragon's essence flowed into her completely. It did not hurt. Instead, it felt like coming home after a journey she had not known she was taking. Her cells restructured themselves. Her consciousness expanded. She felt her awareness stretching across distances, touching minds light years away. She understood languages she had never studied. She saw colors that had no names. When dawn came, Raven stood on legs that felt stronger than before. Her skin shimmered faintly with iridescent patterns. Her eyes had changed, now holding flecks of gold among the brown. She was no longer entirely human, but she was not entirely other either. She was something new, something between, something necessary. Thorn Vex approached and bowed to her. "Welcome, Ridge Walker. You honor us by choosing this path." Raven smiled. "The honor is mine. Now, shall we go see what wonders the universe holds?" 6 months later, the Velinari had integrated into human society better than anyone had dared hope. They shared technology freely, asking for nothing in return except the chance to live in peace. They taught humans about energy sources that did not damage the planet. They showed artists how to create beauty that transcended physical form. They reminded humanity that there was more to existence than conflict and conquest. And on a clear autumn night, Raven Moss climbed onto Ember's back one final time. They rose from Earth together, climbing through the atmosphere and into the void beyond. Behind them, humans and Velinari gathered to watch their departure. Ahead of them, the galaxy turned slowly, full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. As they passed through the space between worlds, Ember sent a final thought to her bonded companion. "Are you afraid, little star?" Raven looked at the universe spreading before them, infinite and beautiful and terrifying. She thought about everything she was leaving behind and everything she was flying toward. She pressed close to Ember's neck and felt their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. "No," she answered truthfully. "I am not afraid. I am home." Together, they disappeared into the stars. Proof that love could bridge any distance, that courage could transform the impossible into reality, and that sometimes the greatest adventure began with a simple choice to save a life in the frozen darkness. Behind them, Earth kept turning. But it was different now. Forever changed by the moment a thermal engineer and a dragon decided that belonging was not about where you came from, but who you chose to fly beside.